let's go up next to the main event here. We got Gunther versus Randy Orton. A big sing along for at least the chorus to Randy Orton's theme, not as loud for the rest of the song. So Berlin not studying up on these lyrics as much as some other places have been, but nonetheless a very loud reaction for the chorus. Gunther comes out. I wouldn't say there was anything special about this entrance. Really, no special entrances for anybody on the show. But I think in terms of atmosphere, maybe that was what they wanted to highlight because he gets a great reception as you would expect. However, we did get a Ludwig Kaiser appearance here as a huge reaction as he takes the mic from Samantha Irvin here, and he delivers a great intro for Gunther. Any thoughts on any of this fanfare before the match?
Ladies and gentlemen, I love this. I'm with John and you on Ludwig. I think he's great. I like the way he addressed the crowd in German. And then did his usual shtick for getting Gunther over. Although I will say, and it was kind of evident really from the beginning, I think the company and the production team and everybody else probably expected much more of a babyface heel reaction than they got here. This was pretty much a 50-50 from the beginning right through to the end. I mean, I wonder where Randy's, we'll get to it, but, during the match, thumb to the eye and stuff, improvised to try and get a little bit of heat. Mm-hmm. But it was followed by RKO chants. This was a pretty 50-50 crowd. And I do wonder, I don't know the political dynamics between Austria and Germany, but I know that, for example, if, an Irishman was presented as a hometown hero in England, it's not going to really work just because these are neighbouring countries, same with Wales and England and so on. So perhaps they over-egged the Austria-Germany connection. Who knows?
Well, I mean, we know Gunther Walter has had a long history of just wrestling in Germany and coming up through the scene in Germany. So I would assume like it was enough of a connection that I think like you could justifiably present him as a hometown guy. I think the crowd just happens to really love Randy Orton, like they love him really anywhere. And I agree with you, Neil. I thought the most interesting aspect of this particular match was how they would handle babyface and heel dynamics. And let's kind of get into it to see what they did here, because we've got, well, first they just pause in the ring. They give space for this crowd to get their football chants out before they start. Just an incredible atmosphere for this main event here. At one point early on, as they're doing just kind of a very slow pace series of headlocks and just kind of feeling each other out, the crowd starts doing the wave. And this is only notable to me because, well, first of all, Orton paused to acknowledge it. But it also reminded me of that Orton versus Sheamus match from the Raw after WrestleMania 29. I don't know if you remember it, Neil.
I do.
John and I were actually present for that particular show. And this was almost like an infamous match where the crowd just completely turned on this match. And they started entertaining themselves with just a series of various chants about just anything. And I'm pretty sure they did the wave then too. But
they did.
It just kind of so seeing a Randy Orton match here where the crowd is doing the wave, I think just reminded me of how far Randy Orton and Sheamus have come since being perceived as sort of boring wrestlers of that time to the fan favorites, I would even say highlights, of a show that they are now. They were doing the wave for a very different reason for, on this evening. They weren't bored. They were just they were excited. They wanted to get their energy out.
100%. I think a lot of people associate doing the wave with Raw after WrestleMania in the bad old times, I'd say. Let's call it maybe 2016 to 2018. I was something like that, sort of the run up to the pandemic years, I feel, when it was, you'd have JBL at the beginning of Raw saying, this is when where they cheer the bad guys and Bizarro World, all of that stuff. So I think a lot of wrestling fans are programmed to associate the wave with the crowd being bored and wanting to entertain themselves. That isn't what was happening here at all, as you've said. They were just getting into the big match atmosphere in their own way.
Yeah, they're doing the wave like again, very much like you would see at a football match, for instance. Like just this like incredible like bursting of energy that just needed to be like out there. So it was an incredible atmosphere here, and again, just the sort of like contrast of seeing Randy Orton in this sort of position again, but in a completely different light, I thought was very interesting. So the match begins. They're on the floor as Orton drives Gunther's shoulder into the steps, and he starts working over Gunther's arm. So this begins pretty much the match-long story of Orton basically taking the lead as the aggressor in the match, which sets up a very rare Gunther underdog babyface story. Gunther attempts his chops and his chokes, but his arm is messed up as Orton keeps focusing on the arm and attacking it. Gunther mounts a comeback, but the clotheslines aren't looking as powerful because of the injured arm. Orton again regains control. Gunther begins a one-arm comeback as Orton cuts him off with the classic heel eye poke. Orton begins teasing the RKO as Gunther escapes. He begins a comeback with a big splash, sacrificing his own arm for a 2 count. Gunther can't powerbomb because of the bad arm, so he clotheslines instead with a good arm. We get a big struggle, and Gunther finally delivers his powerbomb for a 2 count. At this point, Orton avoids another powerbomb attempt and hits an RKO out of nowhere for a very close 2 count. On the floor, Orton is now selling his back thanks to the powerbomb as he back suplexes Gunther onto the steel steps while also selling his own back. We should note, like, they're moving at a pretty slow pace here, but it doesn't feel boring at all because this crowd is so lively and engaged. Orton has the steps set up next to the announce table as he lifts Gunther up off the steps for an extra high belly to back suplex through the table. The referee is acknowledged to have completely stopped the count for this because it was kind of, they might have been up to 60 by this point. Back in, Gunther swats away an RKO and locks in a sleeper hold, and we begin this sort of run up to the finish with this great struggle from Orton and some great crowd reactions during the sleeper hold. Orton breaks out, but Gunther delivers a big chop to his back and locks it back in. Orton falls back to break the sleeper again, but Gunther comes back up, locks the sleeper back in, hammer and anvil elbows, and locks the sleeper in one more time as Randy Orton passes out. I can't remember the last time Orton has tapped, much less passed out from a submission. So I would say a pretty significant way to end the match here as Gunther wins, retaining his championship in 34 minutes and 28 seconds. Your thoughts overall on the match?
Yeah, this was a very WWE match. You're not going to see this in any other promotion. That kind of very deliberate start, the pacing of it. I think the crowd elevated it very, very much. I'm wondering if I'd have got a bit bored with this if it weren't for the crowd getting so into it. Because, as you said, plus 30 minutes is long, and that's bell to bell, isn't it? That doesn't include the entrances, which in themselves were and announcements, which were quite long. But for all of that, I really enjoyed it, and I think it was because of the crowd, because of the tremendous selling, because these two are almost physically made for each other in the ring. Even at the beginning of the match when they're facing off, you sort of think these two are, they are almost literally made physically for one another here. I think they're great together. But I suppose my nitpick would be by the end I was getting a tiny bit antsy. I thought, let's bring it home. Anything over half an hour is a long time, I think, particularly a match of this pace. But the crowd kept it elevated. The two of them did really, really well. And I think this does a lot for Gunther's reign and for the heavyweight title, because Randy's as legit as they get at the moment. And for him to be, submitted by basically passing out. I mean, they called it a tap, but it wasn't a tap. I
didn't see a tap.
No, Charles Robinson lifted the arm and it just flopped. So that, it does a lot for Gunther too. So good for Randy. It's another sign of his growth, I suppose.
Yeah, from the starting point that you brought up earlier, which is very different. Yeah, I thought it was an excellent match. I might go as far as to say my favorite match of the night, and that might differ for some people. But for me, I thought it was it was a Randy Orton paced match in the best way. Okay, like I agree that it was long, it was slow paced, but when you have an atmosphere like this one, the ability to be able to milk every ounce of reaction from a crowd this special, I think is an incredible skill, you know, and having Randy Orton do like what he's able to do best, which is not necessarily just work slow, but to like to maximize reaction per spot, per move, per moment, I think is an incredible skill. And I thought this was a tremendous display of like what Randy Orton does best. In terms of activity, this was like, I would say pretty far from like your Gunther style match of just like, you know, like your chop fest with like stiff looking offense. Those who are looking for that for this Gunther match, I think might come out of it disappointed. But I think you can appreciate matches in various ways and in various styles. And to be able to see Gunther work, I would say a very unique match for him, working as an underdog throughout with an arm injury, showed a different side of Gunther that ultimately resulted in, I think, like a very successful match, you know, relying on selling and pacing and well-placed spots instead. I thought Orton really shined in this closing sleeper like struggle where like he essentially had to he was the one who was relied upon to sell that struggle, which I thought he did a great job of. So overall, I really respected this match. I really actually enjoyed the match. And it's a finish that puts over Gunther about as clean as you can get. While I guess Orton can still hang on to the claim that he never tapped. So if there are any sort of future title aspirations, I guess he remains somewhat protected in that way, which is kind of fascinating. In that like Orton, Gunther's put over as well as you can, while Orton can still hold on to some sort of moral victory too.
And I think it's not the last we'll see of these two. I mean, their match in the King of the Ring final was great as well, you know, shoulder up or not, but they used that to their advantage. And in fact, that was another part of the Randy interview, just to rewind, just to sort of call back to that, where he said, you know, that would have been in the past, we would have just forgotten about that. And he said that it was great that we could do a callback to that and the crowd knew what it was all about. And he's right, you know, that is great, you know, that it gave an excuse for this match. As I say, very WWE, but I don't mean that as an insult at all. You know, you would never see this match on a AEW pay-per-view.
Yeah,
that's not a bad thing because we want this kind of variety. And as you said, something different from Gunther, who's one of the best wrestlers in the world, I think, at the moment. You know, and his selling in particular was one of the strongest points of this match for the connoisseur, I would say. So I think it was the best wrestling match of the show. I agree with you on that. I was more entertained by the Terror Twins versus Liv and Dom. I thought that was more fun, if you want. Very, very good match.
If you like this video, consider joining our Patreon, the Post Wrestling Cafe. Multiple bonus podcasts every week, ad-free shows, and access to our full archive. Otherwise, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Thank you for watching.